Making only $750 a month is like a college student's allowance. Even students working at bars earn more. Having a low-income wife is embarrassing. Maybe you should get a divorce so our son can find a better wife. After all, he's a great catch. My mother-in-law keeps making these rude comments after seeing a pay stub, but it's not even mine. My name is Amanda, and I'm a 32-year-old nurse. I've been married to John for 5 years. We met in college, started dating, and eventually got married. We first met at a party when he was a medical student and I was studying to be a nurse. John hasn't passed the medical licensing exam. He failed twice and took 3 years off. Now he's working part-time and studying hard for the exam. I'm working full-time as a nurse, so I make most of the money for us. John isn't into bragging about money or posting pictures of fancy cars on social media. He's serious about his work, reading stories about people who've lost loved ones to illness, keeping up with the number of people affected by infectious diseases, and studying Japan's healthcare system. I respect him even though he's not a doctor yet. He genuinely wants to help people, so I didn't leave him despite his lack of income and being in his 30s. He hasn't told his parents that he isn't a doctor yet. "Sorry, my mom is too nosy," he says. "It's okay. I support you, so you don't have to worry about your parents. Live your life the way you want. This is just temporary." That's why his situation remained a secret. No one knew because he worked as a night security guard at the hospital where I worked. This way, he was technically employed there. He had enough knowledge and information from my stories to sound like a doctor. So when his parents, who rarely saw us, asked about him, I said yes, patients really like him. I believe that while cruel lies can hurt people, kind lies can sometimes save them. Telling a patient you have 3 months left and there's no chance of recovery is like starting a countdown. It's better to say, "You look good today and you ate a lot." That's how people are. On the other hand, my mother-in-law is very different from my serious and honest husband. She has a harsh personality and is a typical overbearing mother-in-law. She looks down on me for being just a nurse married to her son, the doctor. There must have been so many better options, like a beautiful dermatologist. I always apologize and bow my head when she says things like that. I wholeheartedly support my husband in his pursuit of becoming a doctor, but right now, he's just a high school graduate with a lot of medical knowledge working part-time. He's not even a medical intern yet. However, my husband is genuinely grateful, often saying, "Thank you for everything always." So I silently support him. I'm also very busy with my work. Our combined income is barely enough to make ends meet, but it couldn't be helped. I didn't care much about money because I admired Florence Nightingale and wanted to help people. Currently, I'm a nurse in internal medicine, which has the heaviest workload. Wanting more money doesn't even cross my mind. As long as we can live, eat, and stay healthy, that's enough. Isn't that what life is really about? Even though I'm the one supporting my husband's living expenses and tuition, my mother-in-law tells everyone in the neighborhood, my son is a doctor and earns well. If he were a serious doctor, he wouldn't want his mother bragging about his income, whether good or bad. But my mother-in-law doesn't care and only talks about money, money, money. As her son, he has no choice but to silently endure it. She doesn't know that he's actually working as a security guard in uniform at the hospital instead of walking around in a white coat as she brags about. Even if he were walking around in a white coat, it's not something to boast and gossip about. I understand her pride, but she should hold back. I was worried that my husband's mental state might suffer and he might fail the medical licensing exam because he's barely hanging on. If he ends up spending his entire life as a security guard after trying so hard, it would be heartbreaking. His personality is perfect for being a doctor. His only weakness is his kindness. That's why my mother-in-law makes up stories and says things like, "My son makes $373,000 a year." For him, knowing that's false just adds more pressure. I once gently expressed my concern to her. I think it would be better for the patients if he didn't talk so much about his job because it might cause problems. After all, if you think about it from the opposite perspective, would you want to go to a doctor whose mother is constantly boasting about him when you're sick? But my mother-in-law doesn't care. "Be quiet, you're just a nurse. You should feel lucky to marry a doctor. It's like winning a $3 million lottery. Money can't buy respect. You're just a nursing school graduate. She says mean things. I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me marry John. I respect him as a doctor and as a person, so please leave him alone. You're so annoying. We can make him divorce you and marry someone else. It would be sad if our future grandchild gets your low IQ. She's being really mean. But I stayed quiet. Compared to saving lives or feeling like I'm doing important work, my mother-in-law's mean words didn't bother me much. I didn't take her seriously, but one day she showed up at our house uninvited. Our house is a 30-minute train ride from theirs, so we don't see them often. I'm busy with work, so I'm not around them much. That's why she didn't know the truth until now. Wow, this house is small. Why does my son, who I'm so proud of, have to live in such a poor-looking place? She said loudly. She looked at the row of medical books and said, "Well, he is my son," and took a picture with her phone. But most of the books were for the national medical exam, so I felt nervous. Since this year's books were there, it might show he's still studying. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. We're both busy with work, so we haven't had time to find a bigger place, especially recently. I hinted for her to leave. But then she started looking around our house. What's with these strange dishes? If you're a doctor, you should buy fancy ones. Yes, I'm sorry. They're from a cheap store. What? Cheap store? I'm getting rid of them. No, we didn't have much money because we were spending it on my husband's textbooks and tuition. So we saved money on things like plates that didn't affect our basic meals. As long as we could eat off them, it was okay. Right now, passing his exams was the most important thing. At that time, my husband happened to be working as a security guard at the hospital. It was a good thing he wasn't home. I didn't want him to get upset, so I wanted to get my mother-in-law to leave while he was at work. But she kept going through our stuff. I'm going to get rid of these clothes that look like something a student would wear. If you're a doctor, you should wear expensive clothes. She threw away my husband's favorite clothes. And what's this? A cheap watch? If you're a doctor, get a fancy one, she said, tossing it aside, not realizing the usefulness of a smartwatch. Each thing she threw away was bought with the little money my husband earned. He would have rather been in the operating room treating patients than standing outside feeling humiliated. But he kept working hard for his dreams and the sweat he put into it. But she didn't stop. It's because he married a poor girl that you're living like this, even though he's a doctor. It's unbelievable. I thought we could go shopping together and maybe you could buy me a bag or something. Her words were really mean. I had to tell her that what she expected from my husband, whether he's a student or not, was different from how we lived. I was a doctor too. I wasn't just after his money. Mother-in-law, he's not that extravagant. We like our life the way it is, I said calmly. But she wouldn't listen. You're so frustrating. Do you know how hard he worked to get into medical school? My mother-in-law yelled, getting angrier. She kept searching my house, not stopping at the kitchen but going through every closet, throwing away anything she thought was cheap. Then she started looking through our bills and paperwork. That's when she found the pay stubs. They showed $750.25. Even though my husband's name was on them, she either didn't notice or couldn't read it. She shouted, $750. What do you mean $750? That's not my son's daily wage. Even anesthesiologists make $750 a day, and you're the wife of a doctor making only $750? Are you not working hard enough, or what? She started to lose control. That's why you're so poor. You're just using my son for money. You're barely working as a nurse and tricking a doctor. You're only doing part-time nursing because it sounds good. $750 is nothing, so quit already. That money was earned by him when other doctors passed him by, working hard between his study hours for a very low daily wage. It meant a lot to us. But my mother-in-law wouldn't stop being crazy, and then the worst happened. You're a poor wife who brings bad luck. Divorce her quickly. Just then, my husband came home from his part-time job. He looked shocked to see his clothes and wash thrown away. He started picking them up silently. But my mother-in-law said, "John, I don't want to be mean, but please divorce her. Why did you, with your high education and income, choose such a pathetic woman? I'm so sad, and she only earns $750. But my husband didn't say anything. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. My mother-in-law laughed and said, "I'll bring you the divorce papers. Leave this dusty room and this woman who smells like disinfectant and find a better wife. You're a doctor. You should remarry." Then my husband stood up slowly and said, "Mom, I haven't told you this, but I'm not a doctor yet." "What?" "I'm sorry for not telling you earlier, but I haven't passed the national exam yet. And about that $750. My mother-in-law was so shocked that she looked at me for help. "I don't get it. This $750 paycheck is yours, isn't it?" I realized there was no point in hiding it anymore, so I said, "No, it's not mine." My husband added, "That's my salary from my part-time job." "That can't be. You're lying, aren't you?" "I'm not lying. It's true. I'm not a doctor yet. I failed the national exam twice." My mother-in-law was shocked to hear that her son wasn't a doctor yet. She started acting strangely and slipped on some newspapers she had scattered earlier while going through our house. She fell to the floor and cried out for help. Thankfully, she managed to avoid hitting her head, but her right arm, which she used the most, broke with a loud snap. It was definitely fractured. My husband and I quickly helped her and took her to the hospital, where we brought her to the orthopedic department. But my husband said, "Mom, I'm sorry, but please don't come to our house anymore. And I don't want you to consider me your son anymore." My mother-in-law was trembling from shock, but my husband continued, "I knew you were proud of me, but I couldn't keep lying. But when you insulted the money I worked hard for, that was too much. But I never thought you weren't a doctor. It doesn't matter if I'm a doctor or not. Do you think I'm studying just to earn $750 a day? I'm an adult, and it seems like we have different values, so let's end our relationship." It seemed like my husband had truly decided to cut ties with his mother. She, who had found purpose in boasting about her son, seemed completely heartbroken. Nowadays, she stays at home, too embarrassed to face her neighbors. That same year, my husband passed the medical licensing exam. Despite being a bit older, he started working as a resident physician and did exceptionally well, always showing kindness, like offering tea to the security guards. Our days became peaceful and happy. If my mother-in-law had just waited a few more months, her dream would have come true, and she could have seen him in his white coat. It's really a pity, but she brought it upon herself.